Hello Saints, welcome in for another midweek video. Today I wanted to take a look at 4 little verses in Proverbs chapter 6. This is an intriguing little section in that proverb. And by the way, I can recommend something that many of you have heard me recommend before, and that is that you would read the corresponding day and number of Proverbs. In other words, if it's May the 10th, then you would read Proverbs chapter 10. And if you do that for 1 month, obviously there are 31 chapters in Proverbs, and some months there's 31 days. But if you'll do that for 1 month, you will revolutionize your life. You will change your outlook. You will change a lot about your life, your walk with God. Just use the book of Proverbs as a devotional. Proverbs chapter 6. He begins, but in verses 12 and 13 of that chapter, he says, what are worthless and wicked people like? Worthless and wicked people like. He said they're constant liars. They signal their deceit, and there's a key word, with a wink of the eye, a nudge of the foot, a wiggle of the fingers. And he starts describing people that in many ways oppose God. I don't assume for 1 minute that anybody watching this video is a worthless person. I don't assume for 1 minute that people watching this video are wicked people. But I do know that everybody watching this video and the guy making the video, we are encumbered by a human body, a flesh. We are encumbered by an old nature that tries to raise its head from time to time. And it's Paul described in Romans chapter 7, the constant battle that he had with his flesh of trying to do what was right and still finding himself doing what was wrong. We all face this battle, so it's important for us to know what interests God, what is on God's mind, and in this case, what does God hate? Because he goes on down, I think in verse 16, he goes on to say, there are 6 things which the Lord hates, yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. Now, some people think that when he does that little repeating 6 things, yes, 7, some people think that and I believe this is true, that it is a method by which you call attention to what you're saying. Other people believe, and I believe this is probably true as well, that at the same time, the 7th item on his list, he's calling immediate attention to, making it an important issue. There are 6 things which the Lord hates. I'd like to know what the Lord hates. Yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. And he says, a proud look. The Amplified Bible really helps us here. It says, the proud look, the spirit that makes one overestimate himself and underestimate others. Some versions there call it haughty eyes, or being haughty. One of the issues we deal with as human beings who have still living in a fleshly fallen body, one of the issues we deal with is that we have a tendency to want to build ourselves up, toot our own horn, and to sort of make everyone else look less than, especially if we're insecure. Because if we can make somebody else look less than what they are, or less than us, then it makes us look greater. And that's one of the things we need to guard against, having haughty eyes, being those who overestimate ourselves and try to underestimate others. The next thing he talks about is a lying tongue. God always deals in truth. Truth always keeps the atmosphere clean and clear. Truth removes anything that would clog up, mess up, dilute, confuse the issue. If you're always dealing in truth, then you can get a resolution to whatever you're dealing with. He goes on to say, not just a lying tongue, but hands that shed innocent blood. Now, obviously, he's talking about murder. But James 4 tells us that we can murder one another with our tongue. And so sometimes we injure people with our words, and sometimes we murder them. We murder their character. I think God hates that. He says God hates a heart that plots wicked schemes. Wicked scheme is that which is other than God's scheme. Anything that's other than God's will, anything that's other than God's way is evil and wicked. And so he says in that same verse, not only does God hate a heart that plots wicked schemes, but he hates feet that run to evil. Sometimes we have to choose where we go. Sometimes we have to choose who we go there with so that we keep our feet from running to evil. Again, we do have fleshly desires. We do have a carnal nature, which is why, as I read this past Sunday at Abundant Life Church, John the Baptist said, he must increase and I must decrease. Jesus must increase. I and my flesh must decrease. Feet that run to evil always get us into trouble. They always get us in predicaments. Sometimes they're very costly, and sometimes God's mercy and God's grace keeps us out of deep trouble, but it always gets us into a mess. And then he finishes up by saying God hates a false witness who gives false testimony. And you might say, well, we just read it that he hates a lying tongue. What's the difference? A lying tongue is just anyone dealing in any type of falsehood, anyone dealing in what is not true. A false witness, on the other hand, affects other people directly. A false witness who gives false testimony about someone, who says things about other people that is not true. And so then he finishes up, I'll come back to that. He finishes up by saying, and one who stirs up discord among the brethren. As I said, many people believe when he writes, there are 6 things, yes, 7, which are an abomination to him. That the stirring up of discord exceeds in importance of first 6. They're all important. And they're all a key for us to avoid. It's important that we look at what God hates. And we can't just say, well, I'll never do that. I don't know about you, but I've done plenty of things that I either thought or said I would never do. There's been plenty of times that I gave in to my humanity and said things that I wished I could get back because they came out of my flesh and not out of my spirit. Here's the interesting thing about these things that God hates. A proud look it comes from our eyes. A lying tongue obviously comes from our tongue. Hands that shed blood. A heart plots. Feet that run. Our whole being, eyes, tongue, hands, heart, feet, even our mouth. False witness who gives false testimony, the English Standard Version there says, who breathes out false testimony. False testimony has to come out of our mouth, unless we were to write it down. But God is saying to us, these are the things that I hate, and your whole body, your whole being is capable of doing all of these. Again, I don't think anyone that's listening and watching this video is grossly guilty of this, but hey, let's set the bar high. Let's raise the bar and say, God, help me to never dip into these things that you hate, and let us live a life of holiness. Now you go out there and act like somebody, and that will happen. Good day.